By early 1763, the world had endured nearly 7 years of relentless conflict, stretching across Europe, North America, the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia. The war had involved virtually every major power of the time, leaving nations financially drained, populations exhausted, and colonial empires shaken. Amid this widespread devastation, the leaders of Europe recognized that peace was no longer optional, it was essential. The Treaty of Hubertusburg, settling Central Europe. In Central Europe, the key belligerents were Prussia, Austria, and Saxony, with Sweden playing a minor role. The conflict in this theater had primarily revolved around Silesia, a prosperous region coveted by both Prussia and Austria. Negotiations culminated in the Treaty of Hubertusburg, signed in February 1763. The treaty essentially restored the status quo ante bellum, meaning that territorial boundaries were returned to their pre-war positions. Frederick the Great retained Silesia, marking a significant triumph for Prussia and solidifying its emergence as a major European power. Austria, though unable to reclaim Silesia, preserved the rest of its territories, maintaining a balance of power in Central Europe. While the Treaty of Hubertusburg might seem modest in terms of territorial change, its significance lay in the validation of Prussia as a military and political power. Frederick's strategic brilliance and ability to survive against overwhelming odds had earned him respect and recognition across the continent. This treaty also underscored the limits of Austria's influence, forcing it to accept that Prussia would remain a central player in European affairs for decades to come. The Treaty of Paris, redrawing the global map. Simultaneously, across the Atlantic and in colonial territories, negotiations were underway to settle the broader conflicts that had engulfed the globe. These discussions culminated in the Treaty of Paris, signed just 5 days before the Treaty of Hubertusburg in February 1763. This treaty fundamentally reshaped the colonial map and confirmed Britain's position as the preeminent global power. Under the Treaty of Paris, France ceded all territories in North America east of the Mississippi River to Britain, including Canada and its claims along the Ohio River Valley. This effectively ended French ambitions in continental North America and paved the way for British dominance over the 13 colonies. Louisiana, the territory west of the Mississippi, was transferred to Spain as compensation for Spain's losses elsewhere, particularly Florida. Florida was ceded by Spain to Britain, further consolidating British control in North America. French Caribbean colonies, notably Martinique and Guadeloupe, were returned to France. These islands remained highly valuable due to their sugar production, illustrating the economic calculus behind the treaty. In India, the British East India Company emerged as the dominant foreign power. Although the French retained small enclaves, the balance of influence had shifted decisively in Britain's favor, setting the stage for future expansion across the subcontinent. The Treaty of Paris marked a clear victory for Britain, solidifying its global empire and securing its naval supremacy. France, while retaining some lucrative Caribbean colonies, had lost the majority of its North American holdings, severely limiting its global influence. Spain, despite some territorial losses, maintained a presence in the Americas and the Philippines, but had suffered a humbling defeat in the Caribbean. Political and economic aftermath. The conclusion of the 7 Years' War had far-reaching consequences beyond the battlefield. Financial strain and taxation, the enormous costs of waging a global war left many nations, especially Britain, deeply in debt. To recoup these expenditures, Britain introduced new taxation policies in its North American colonies, such as the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts. These measures, perceived as unjust by the colonists who had no representation in Parliament, sowed the seeds of the American Revolution less than 2 decades later. Shift in global power. Britain emerged as the dominant colonial empire, controlling key territories in North America, the Caribbean, Africa, and India. Prussia's survival and consolidation of Silesia elevated it to the status of a major European power.
France's global influence waned, while Austria's ambitions in Central Europe were checked. Spain's losses highlighted the vulnerabilities of even established empires. Military innovation and lessons learned. The war had demonstrated the importance of professional standing armies, naval supremacy, and strategic alliances. Frederick the Great's tactical brilliance became a model for European militaries, while Britain's naval power showcased the strategic value of controlling the seas in global conflicts. Diplomatic realignments. Alliances forged and broken during the war set the stage for future European diplomacy. The so-called diplomatic revolution, Austria's alliance with France and Britain's partnership with Prussia, would influence continental politics for decades, demonstrating the fluidity and complexity of international relations. Cultural and societal impacts. The 7 Years' War was not only a geopolitical watershed, but also a cultural and societal turning point. Populations across Europe endured years of hardship, famine, and displacement. The sheer scale of mobilization and casualties left an indelible mark on societies. Colonists in North America witnessed firsthand the power and limits of imperial authority, planting the seeds of revolutionary thought. In India, the British East India Company's victories laid the foundation for future British colonial dominance, reshaping the subcontinent's political landscape for centuries. The war also contributed to shifts in military doctrine, emphasizing logistics, intelligence, and coordination across multiple theaters, lessons that would inform future conflicts, including the Napoleonic Wars. Legacy of the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War, often called the First Global War, had reshaped the world in ways that would resonate long after the last treaties were signed. It demonstrated how a conflict could span continents, involving Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Asia simultaneously. Its consequences were felt not only in territorial shifts, but also in economic strain, political realignments, and societal transformation. The world that emerged in 1763 was markedly different. Britain stood at the peak of its global influence. Prussia had become a Central European power. France and Spain were forced to reassess their colonial ambitions, and the stage was set for future revolutions and conflicts that would define the next century. In many ways, the 7 Years' War served as a precursor to modern global warfare, illustrating that conflicts were no longer confined to single regions, but could truly engulf the world. It was a war of empires, of strategy, and of ambition, a conflict whose impact shaped the political, economic, and cultural contours of the late 18th century and beyond.
The 7 Years' War is often referred to as the First World War because of its scale and global reach. Unlike earlier conflicts confined to Europe or single regions, this war spanned multiple continents, involved numerous empires, and affected civilian populations worldwide. It foreshadowed many elements of modern warfare. Global scope. The war was fought across Europe, North America, the Caribbean, Africa, and Asia. Economic warfare. Control over colonies and trade routes was as important as battlefield victories. Diplomatic complexity. Alliances shifted rapidly, demonstrating the importance of strategy beyond the battlefield. Long-term consequences. The outcomes influenced revolutions, colonial administration, and global power dynamics for decades. In essence, the 7 Years' War revealed that wars were no longer isolated regional disputes. They had become global, interconnected events with far-reaching consequences. The 7 Years' War transformed the world in profound ways. It marked the rise of Britain as the preeminent global power, solidified Prussia's position in Europe, and demonstrated the declining influence of France and Spain in certain regions. It reshaped North America, paving the way for the American Revolution, and altered the political landscape of India, laying the foundations for British imperial dominance. Culturally, the war impacted societies, economies, and populations across continents. Militarily, it introduced innovations in strategy, tactics, and coalition warfare that would influence future conflicts. Politically, it forced empires to reconsider alliances, diplomacy, and governance. Ultimately, the Seven Years' War was the world's first truly global conflict, a precursor to the modern concept of world wars. Its legacy endured long after the treaties were signed, shaping the 18th and 19th centuries and leaving a permanent mark on global history. The war demonstrated the immense consequences of imperial ambition, the complexities of global diplomacy, and the transformative power of conflict in reshaping nations, societies, and the world order.